I want to give you a different angle today, which would connect to the entrepreneurial issues, and that is entrepreneurial diplomacy. And how do you do entrepreneurial diplomacy in the United Nations, that basically are always united against Israel? So you have to bring it from a different angle. And when I came in with my team to the United Nations, I looked at it and said, hey, they ran with fire extinguishers before me. They'll run with fire extinguishers after me because of the political reasons. What can we do to make a difference? And we looked at the United Nations like 101 economics. There's a demand and there's supply. There's demand for demonization and delegitimization against Israel. That's obvious to you. But there's also demand for Israeli know-how. So let's supply the Israeli know-how. We'll never reach equilibrium like in Samuelson 101 economics. But let's try. And how do you do it? Let's move and present Israeli technologies, Israeli innovation, in a place where you know it, but most people in the world do not. So you do it through running a resolution at the United Nations on agricultural technologies, which are relevant to, of course, Africa, the Caribbean, to the former Soviet Union. And when I say that, run an Israeli resolution, Kachol Lavan, it means that the General Assembly, 193 countries, 22 countries of the Arab League, 57 countries of the Organization of Islamic Countries, and 126 countries of the non-alignment movement, have to give you a majority. So you work, and you work for nearly a year on agricultural technologies and entrepreneurship for development. And the bottom line, it's like a military operation. 141 countries out of the 193 raised their hand for an Israeli resolution, Kachol Lavan. Some do not have diplomatic ties with us. The ambassador of Tanzania steps over to the podium in the General Assembly and says, I have a lot to say about the Palestinian issue, but what Israel does in Africa is absolutely amazing. I support Israel. I nearly jumped on stage and hugged him. And then bring it from another angle. Went out to New York and saw Rita. You know, and in the crowd, most of you know who Rita is. Who doesn't? Okay, so Rita is an Israeli singer. She's born in Iran. And I saw her singing in New York in Farsi and in Hebrew. And I said, wow, you know, she's singing in Farsi and Hebrew. Everyone talks about the Iran nuclear weapons program. We are going to bring Rita to sing in the United Nations, in the General Assembly Hall. And they have a problem with her leadership, but we have nothing against the Iranian people. So I went to the Secretary General, persuaded him and the President of the General Assembly. It took a year's time. The most important and the toughest thing was to persuade the Persian community in Los Angeles to give me the funds I needed. That was tougher than the United Nations. But having entrepreneurial and inspirational manner managed to pass that, Rita appeared in the General Assembly, sang, 121 countries were there. No other country has ever brought a singer to sing in the General Assembly. Bono, Beyonce, and Stevie Wonder sang in the hospices under UNICEF. And I think the Iranians also peeked in to listen what was happening in. And then, what Israel does also in the whole realm of, I would say, ALA, let's take food, for example. We decided to bring Israeli food from all parts into the United Nations on Independence Day. So bring the flavors of what Israel is all about, and through that, tell the story of the different minorities and what happens in Israel as a diverse society. And we managed to do that, forcing the Secretary General to eat a shakshuka. It was tough, but he's on record saying he really liked it. He also gave some to his wife, which in South Korean language means it was really good. And then we had different stations, and also from Gazala Druze food was there, and people connected and asked questions. And then another angle which has economic aspects, and that is the whole procurement issue at the United Nations. People don't think about that. The United Nations budget is $5.5 billion a year, and $8.5 billion just for peacekeeping forces. They need to eat, communication, water, and. $1.6 billion just go on procurement. Israeli companies never tapped into this whole. Through doing different seminars, bringing people to Israel, learning and teaching Israelis how to fill the enormous forms work that the UN has, we have really, we've reached, how much, Ella? 70 million? 70 million, and it was, through a 4-year process. So in the sense, also from that angle, bringing in a whole different dimension of Israel into the United Nations. And I have to tell you that when you see that, and you see countries from all over the world, and especially, I told you about entrepreneurship for development, you could see the Saudis, the Qataris, countries that we don't really have diplomatic ties, go into the room. They don't present themselves with a sign, hey, but we know them. And they came in order to listen. So they come in, they listen to what Israel, of course, they vote against it, and they work against it, and they say that Israel is not legitimate to even present different resolutions at the United Nations, but it begins to make a slow difference. And the point that I want to say is that using the entrepreneurial spirit also in the diplomatic part is absolutely crucial. And I want to end by telling you that what we see now happening in the Middle East is absolutely historical. We see nation states disintegrating before our eyes. Libya gone, Yemen gone, Syria gone, Iraq on the way. No new structures have really been built. And the entrepreneurial spirit means to look at what's happening in our region and use the fact that for the first time in many years, we have coinciding interests with the Saudis, the Gulfies, and the Arab world. Not because they give a toss about the Palestinians, forget that, but because they feel that their own survivability is on the line, because they feel that the rope is tightening around their necks because of the Iranian issue. I don't care why, but the point here is that we should tap into that and use what I call entrepreneurial diplomacy, because it's part of our responsibility, especially when the risks are high, to look for the opportunities that you in the business world can see always when there's a crisis, where there's change, where there's transition, there's also a window of opportunity that we can use. So from the vantage point of the UN, to see the Middle East is absolutely amazing. You see the Saudi ambassador physically shaking and pointing towards the Iranian ambassador. What's your name? Ido, you'll be the Iranian ambassador for this case. So he's shaking physically, pointing towards the Iranian ambassador, saying, you tried to assassinate my ambassador, Adel Jubeir, in Washington, D.C., in a wonderful restaurant called Cafe Milano in Georgetown. The Iranian ambassador stands up and bashes the Saudi ambassador. The Saudi ambassador points towards Bashar Jafri, the Syrian ambassador. What's your name? Ron. Points towards Ron, who is Bashar Jafri for this case, the Syrian ambassador who can lie for 50 consecutive minutes. I think when he snores, he lies. But this time round, the Kuwaiti ambassador moves the sign Kuwait. Kuwaiti ambassador, I didn't even know had vocal cords. Moves the sign Kuwait from horizontal to vertical, saying, I want to say something. Says, not only do I vote against Syria, but I co-sponsor a resolution against Syria. And I sit there and say, continue, gentlemen, continue. But beyond, by the way, this really happens, okay? But take that beyond the story and really let's utilize it. Because the Arab world today is different than what we've seen for many, many years. And we should use those opportunities. The Saudis always remind me a bit of those two elderly gentlemen on the Muppet Show sitting on the balcony and shouting, "It's a lousy show," are willing to pull up the sleeves and do some stuff that they were not willing to do for many years. And we have to be there. So in the point that I want to make, startup nation, innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, let's use that also in the diplomatic field, and we can make a difference. Toda rabah.